Indeed, and it really does seem like the crew, they were giant heroes in this whole episode, so our hats off to them. What next, though? What next for the thousands of passengers who were stuck on that cruise ship? I'm talking about from a legal standpoint, from a dollars and cents standpoint. We're going to bring in Jack Hickey. He's a maritime lawyer who specializes in cruise line liability. Jack, we've heard these nightmare stories, just awful stories. The passengers now headed home. What kind of legal recourse do they have? How liable is Carnival?
Well, John, that's the $64,000 question.
Or more.
Or more, right, exactly. This is governed by two things. Carnival's liability is governed by two things. One is the maritime law, and two is the ticket. And everybody's talked about the cruise ticket conditions. I think that in a case where there are mental anguish damages only, you got to have two things to recover, and I think you have them here. One thing is negligence of Carnival, and we can go through the negligence from the fire itself, suppression of the fire, their reaction afterwards, not getting the generators on board in time, not getting good food. All of a sudden, they get close to the port and they get good food. There are a lot of questions there. I think there's negligence of Carnival. Number two, you have to have the risk of and exposing the passengers to the risk of actual physical injury. And they have been exposed with exposure to sewage, raw sewage. We've seen films on CNN. We've seen a video of the carpet soaked with sewage, and that's exposing people to hepatitis A and to a host like 7 or 8 or 9 other infectious diseases.
But exposure's not enough. You actually have to be injured in some way, correct?
Well, no. In order to recover from mental anguish, right, in order to recover from mental anguish only without the actual physical injury, you have to have those two things. And so the question is, which is not terribly resolved in the case law, okay? The question is exposure to a disease like that, the exposure to actual physical injury.
So the Carnival ticket contract says that the cruise line is not liable to the passenger for damages for emotional distress, mental anguish, psychological injury, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There must be an actual physical injury. How much, when you sign that ticket, how much of your rights to sue or a class action suit are signed away? Okay,
so there's a couple of questions here. First of all, you don't sign anything. I mean, people, they can get it through the internet and you have to click the I agree. How many people ever read one word of the I agrees, before they click on that? Nobody. And second of all, there is a clause. That is what the ticket says, but if you read down, it does provide for, because there's a federal statute on point, it has to, it does provide for mental anguish only damages. But and you have to read it like 5 or 6 times before you understand anything about it. And I've been doing this as a maritime attorney for 32 years, and I still, even with this thing, I had to go back and read it several times.
We're talking so much about the crew. I just want to make a point. These crews are not governed by U.S. labor laws. Am I right?
Correct.
So when you talk about all those extra hours they worked and the like, it's going to be up to Carnival and maritime law to decide what kind of compensation the crew gets for all the time and energy and extra time spent on there, because they are not governed by U.S. labor laws.
Can I just say, it seems there is a lot of murky law here. Is that the case?
To use a maritime expression, yes, there's some murky law in regard to their compensation. Now, this is not, we're not talking about millions of dollars, and in the case of somebody who just was inconvenienced, and I'm not trying to downplay the conditions on board by any means, because I think they're horrible, horrendous, but in those circumstances, you've got to consider, well, is it worth bringing a lawsuit against Carnival in federal court in Miami, Florida, for that level of damages?
All right, thank you very much. It's great to see a lot of questions legally in this case.
Thank you, John.
Christine, you have some of the rest of the news.
I do. A lot going on today.